as in college, we're working on a couch today discussing classes.
Oh yeah.
That's from a couch is definitely where I did most of my studying, I guess.
I didn't
That
do studying anywhere, so
Oh
this is as
yeah.
good as it gets.
Yeah, about as good as it gets. I mean this these swaths of books is definitely reminiscent of college days. But I'm Joe.
I'm Kev.
We're talking about D&D classes. Um
Or just archetypical classes, right?
yeah.
So I think we I think we just said we were gonna start with the 4 points, 4 classics, right? We have fighter, wizard, rogue, and cleric. On top of being just tropes at this point, are also kind of like the 4 schools of play that people kind of gravitate towards. You have like straight up melee, stealth, um, magic user, aggressive, magic user, healer,
Hmm.
right? And you could even
Defensive or
make a
support.
case of combining wizard and cleric, even I think.
Yeah.
But they're unique enough.
Yeah, this conversation originally kicked off when you and I were talking about. Well, I was kind of trash talking the wizard class in D&D,
Oh, and I agreed
saying
with you.
that. Oh, you agree with me on
Yeah.
that? Yeah, saying that it's probably like the wizard is the least interesting and most poorly designed fifth edition class. And then you kind of brought up that your Punnett square, your 2x2 matrix example, talking about how each kind of archetype exists in one of the 4 corners of a square of those 4.
Mm-hmm.
And those 4 really kind of influence and inform the all others. And there's a lot of interesting interplay that each of those kind of overlaps, because you can have a stealthy fighter, you can have a martial cleric, so on and so forth. But you were saying that wizard, in a lot of ways, is the most separate, like it's the furthest apart. Do you want to explain your thought process on that a little?
It's definitely a trope, but you could make a case to replace wizard on that square with sorcerer. You could make a case to combine it with cleric.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the idea of the square starts with those 4 archetypes, and then the other archetypes living somewhere in that square between the 4 points, right? So if it was a triangle and you're trying to put a cleric on there, the cleric would kind of be in the same space as a wizard. So in that way, I think it earns its own corner to make it a square. Um, I don't know why I said the wizard was the farthest apart.
I think it was.
Jog my memory.
I think what you were trying to get at was each of them kind of has interesting things that kind of poke out to make it more unique. And the more that you kind of go down the road of the wizard, the more specialized and further away it comes from that kind of natural mechanical interaction that it has with other classes. And I know that, we can talk at length about like your kind of Gish types, your Arcane Trickster, your Eldritch Knight, and what have you, Sword Singer or whatever it is. But I really don't feel that any of those kind of are what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, those are another point in the square between fighter and wizard.
Yeah, those have much more to do with like kind of like flavoring of a subclass, while we're talking about like the general archetype,
Mm-hmm.
in its mechanical or thematic flavor kind of just becomes more and more pure of itself. So that was what you were thinking, and then that kind of transformed into the conversation of why classes exist and why those kinds of archetypes came about.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I think is for sure is definitely media as to why those different archetypes and different classes came out. Like,
We mentioned before that comparing this to the classic races, being human, elf, dwarf, halfling, that's
mhm,
entirely because of Lord of the Rings.
yeah.
So, like, similarly, these classes, probably from a wider variety of media, but are derived from a similar source.
What was that one board game? Was it Dungeon Quest? Um,
Was it the best thing about Dungeon Quest? Is that one?
Maybe. I can't remember. There was a board game called Dungeon Quest where you were given a board. It was just it kind of looked like a Clue board game, and you had a whole bunch of minis that came in the box, and you just walked around just killing stuff, getting loot. And
Mm-hmm.
that was the whole game. Um and in that there was magic user, fighting man, dwarf, and elf. Those were the classes.
Well, those are the classes in AD&D too.
Yeah,
Or
essentially.
which one? I forget. Whatever the original D&D was, minus the rogue
AD&D cleric, fighting man,
and magic
magic
user.
user.
I feel like that one's going to be harder to pin down. I don't think we're going to find a source that's going to be like, this is why all four of these are the archetypes. I mean, I think you could probably attribute wizard to Gandalf similarly, but
Yeah, I
fighter is
think
just such an open concept. Like John McClane from Die Hard is a fighter.
yeah.
You know?
I really feel that a lot of those four kind of archetypes really come from Wizard. I was gonna say Wizard of the Coast, but it was before that. It was AD&D.
TSR.
Yeah, TSR. I think it. Those four really come from there.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of like the adaptation of them going forward. I mean, what's his face definitely had a Tolkien definitely had a lot of influence on that as well. But
All of fantasy.
yeah, it's also really interesting to see kind of how over time each of those has kind of become much more varied and distributed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Especially in like what they mean and what we kind of think and see in them. So, from the original four, now looking at D&D 5th edition, we have 12. If you were to go to third, that's technically a whole different beast.
Mm-hmm.
But like just staying within 5th, because that's where our knowledge really lies. That's a pretty big jump to go from 4 to 12, like add three times as many classes.
Yeah, I mean, I think these classes really, one of the purposes is to serve as a baseboard. Really, they are supposed to be kind of, aside from functioning how you want them to function, they should really be like flavorless baseboards for you to put your own character on top of, right? Like I think that's why it's called fighter and not warrior, because fighter is, I feel like, a more general term,
Mm-hmm.
if only even slightly.
Yeah.
And like people can bring their flavor and their characters and put it on top. And I think I'd be interested in to study this further, because I haven't studied this, but like I'd be interested to see where these other archetypes like ranger and barbarian came about, because you could really look at them as multi-classes. And that's another thing about the chart, like a ranger is somewhere in between a fighter and a rogue on the chart, but bumped a little up towards maybe wizard or just the magic user side of the square, because they do have a couple spell slots. Paladin being somewhere between fighter and cleric, so on and so forth. And so I think maybe these were just archetypes that definitely existed, but people tried to recreate them often enough that they became a necessary archetype to include.
Main staples, yeah.
But I think there's also, potential for bloat in that kind of case. I'm not a huge fan of the monk personally in D&D. I think that should be a fighter subclass.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a mixed opinion, but but on the flip side of that, go ahead.
So I don't mean to cut you off if you wanted to finish your point.
I was going to make I was just say like you have games like Trudvang and Morkborg, which have names for their classes, even though they're addressing the same archetypes, their names for the classes are wildly different, and I think that's for the purpose of casting off your assumptions about about those classes that you're bringing probably from D&D, and use these new terms that are going to help immerse you a little bit more because those two examples are a little bit more flavored.
Yeah, I think with when it comes to class, I think it's the world. I think its primary purpose is world building.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason that you have an issue with the monk is because it doesn't kind of fit into the world that fifth edition just presents to you like on its face. In all of these books that we have in front of us, you know, we have um, fifth edition, Pathfinder, Morkborg, Blades in the Dark, Trudvang's over there. Each of those has a fighting man warrior archetype, but each of them calls them something different, and each of those, the names and imagery that they try to conjure is meant to show and share something about the way that the setting, the rules, and the game system functions. It's to put you into the headspace of this is the world that I'm diving into. And so I think it's kind of double. It does act as like a blank slate that for you to kind of throw your creative might behind. But I think it also is meant to act as you said like a baseboard to like jump off of, like a cornerstone to ground you in the world of like, okay, yes, this is your character, this is what they're doing. But then within the confines of the world, this is the kind of expectation that this archetype of character has, right? Like the roguish archetype in Trudvang, they explicitly say that there are few dwarves that are rogues because that's considered to be a very dishonorable thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
In uh let's say Morkborg, the Fanged Deserter is your kind of fighter archetype, really strong, but Deserter instantly conjures up this image of somebody who is just savage, gnarled, and feral, who is some kind of outcast, and you know that by the fact that they're called a deserter.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those kinds of components work to build the world. And I think with Wizard and Monk in 5th edition, specifically Monk, because they present the monk as a as an Eastern, kind of like fantasy version of a Shaolin monk, kind of like Avatar esque, have a lot of like kind of influence and interest kind of stuff from there.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the book kind of really comes off as like Western style European fantasy, especially in the Swords Coast, where the Swords Coast is very almost directly kind of modeled after Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why the monk is at odds, because it's kind of this, it kind of instantly presents itself with this fish out of water dynamic without really kind of explaining and putting in the historical information that you would need to have. Because there are I would say the only other thing in that book, 5th edition, that I can think of that kind of plays at the knowledge of the wider world is a few images of the fighter, who is demonstrated as this kind of like Lawrence of Arabia, I'm not Lawrence of Arabia, but kind of like Aladdin kind of fantasy. Um, and the art kind of hints that he's also an outlander,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't really make any reference to like, the swords masters of the great deserts who like ride along and like educate fighters or something, like, you know what I mean. um that kind of imagery is implying, right? So when we look into the book, I would want the book to show like either one thing, one image of the class that represents the single most normative version of that, or show like six or seven or eight different renditions of that class, how they could be portrayed. And that would I would feel that that would kind of give you a lot of stuff, because when you go into something like Elder Scrolls and you select monk, they take a monk from a uh, Western perspective, kind of like a monk in a temple kind of deal,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just kind of, I feel like you're kind of more close to what D&D would call a cleric in that sense, right?
I think in
Um,
Oblivion they still give you hand-to-hand proficiency.
yeah, I think I think that there's a lot there. But what's also kind of odd is a lot of the monk subclass kind of takes from that the notion of like Eastern alchemy as well, where you're kind of making your body this vessel, um, and you're, by doing all these acts and rituals and training, you're basically making your body into like this pure vessel to resist disease and age and all these benefits that come from a very specific
Self-actualized kind of monk.
of self-actualized as a monk, but also heavily, heavily influenced by Eastern uh, culture and Eastern traditions and other sorts of like supernatural mythologies and beliefs.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think my aversion to monks come from a twofold reasons. If I'm even using that phrase right. The first is that I had a player who liked to build counter DM fortresses,
Hmm.
and the best way he did that was with an elf monk that would just have immunity to as much as possible. So that's
Hmm.
probably just a bad taste. So that's my disclaimer. But the other reason has to do with principles of designing a class. And I think you have to honor two principles when you're designing these kinds of things. The first is the fantasy, and the second is the function.
Hmm.
So I think, in my mind, the monk kind of represents a fantasy that a lot of people definitely want to play as in their campaigns, but it is too functionally different on paper. Once you write down like how you think a monk should function, it doesn't graft onto the fighter base as well. So in that way, I think they kind of just decided to go with a new class instead, because it is they do kind of function on the same fantasy basis, which is like as like a berserker or barbarian who you know technically non-magically formulates their power and their strength and just in their body, and however they do that. Barbarian through their rage, and a monk through self-actualization, I guess. But I don't think in regard to like the baseboard of flavor that the rest of these classes represent, I don't think that a monk stands up in that way. I don't think they stand up to I guess the function of flavor. You can't. There's not a lot of thematic diversity that you can graft onto a monk.
Well, I think that there is. I think that they just don't provide it to you. You know what I mean? A lot of a monk's abilities are just like very kind of selfish in a way. Like
Mm-hmm.
they don't really have any sort of utility outside of their own individual person, and they also are a lot of passive effects that don't really have any sort of like active benefit. All they do is just kind of circumvent
Yeah, but so
stuff that's
that's
happening.
but that's function. I'm talking about like the flavor that you
Yeah.
of characters that you make with a monk.
And what I'm saying is like the function don't feed into the flavor, and the flavor that they provide is very much
Focused in on that Eastern martial arts style of monk.
yeah, and
Right.
doesn't really give um like doesn't allow for a lot more stuff. I mean, unless you totally like subvert everything that the book is demonstrating to you right out the gate.
Mm-hmm.
Let me crack open the book here. I want to take a look.
Which one? Player's Handbook, a classic.
Let's start with this.
I think I think you mentioned that monks are innately self-involved. Um, that their function kind of bolsters themselves and looks inward is a big reason why it was the go-to for that player's anti-DM fortress.
You know, it's funny. I was in a Adventures League game, and there was a player who made a character kind of with that had a similar philosophy. What he did was he made a monk rogue hybrid, and basically just got a huge amount of speed. So what he would do was he would run like 100 feet up to a monster, punch it, disengage, run away 100 feet, and then just keep doing drive-by punches, just like going up, poking the thing, running away. And what was kind of funny was as we were playing, what we kind of realized, because because he wasn't there, the player wasn't there to soak up damage. The rest of us started to take much more damage.
Mm-hmm.
So by the end of the session, he would be like totally fine because he basically just didn't engage in combat, and all of us were just trashed.
I bet they considered that a big victory.
We definitely thought. I remember like playing with it, and I was just kind of like, as a player, I was getting annoyed at this antics. It's like, I get if you want to, you want to play and you like to demonstrate that you have mastery over the game.
But it's a team sport.
Yeah, exactly. It was just so annoying.
So what are you cracking in that book there?
I just wanted to look at the monk because it's been a minute since I've actually just looked at the monk and what they get. I forgot that they get at 20th level, they get plus 30 to their movement speed.
Oof. It's been a while for me too, because honestly, I soft banned monk for a little while there.
Mm. Yeah, unarmored movement, unarmored defense, missile catching, slow falling. You can become invisible at some point. You can re-roll to take less damage. You become immune to disease and poison. You can't be charmed or frightened. You can empower your strikes with ki. Oh, and that's another thing. They also use ki um, as their magic source.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing that very much makes them distinct. It's like it's not
Well, what's their description of key? What's their like flavorful? Um, where do they say it comes from?
starting at second level. Your training allows you to harvest the mystical energy of ki. Your access to energy is represented by a number of key points. Your monk level determines the number of points you have. But it doesn't actually say what ki is.
Hmm. I guess they're trying to maintain the clean slate baseboard that we were talking about.
Maybe.
much as they
Oh,
can.
here the magic of key. Monks
There
are
we go.
monks make careful study of a magical energy that most traditions called ki. The energy is the element of magic that suffuses the multiverse, specifically the elements that flow through living bodies. Monks harness this power within themselves to create magical effects and exceed their body's physical capabilities.
So it's actually an external force.
It seems, well, it's an external force that pervades them. So they're basically a sorcerer. This is closer to a sorcerer than anything.
All right, I take it back. A monk shouldn't be a fighter subclass. It should be a sorcerer subclass.
It's actually just a sorcerer. Like, let me run over to the sorcerer real quick.
Yeah, they have like sorcery points and everything, right?
They have sorcery points, and the magic comes from them.
I guess everything in this book is going to be a little bit Forgotten Realms, centered, right?
Of course.
But the function of the actual game is not going to, force you into that fantasy.
Mm-hmm. Magic is part of every sorcerer, suffusing their body, mind, and spirit with a latent power that waits to be tapped. Some sorcerers wield magic that springs from an ancient bloodline infused with magic of dragons. Others carry raw, uncontrolled magic within them, a chaotic storm that manifests in unexpected ways. So, a monk and a sorcerer, as written in 5th edition, are the same thing. I mean, it's the manifestation of magic as it pervades you.
My previous definition would agree, but apparently ki is an external force and a sorcerer's is internal.
What, this is internal?
Keys, it said it's the magical force of the universe or something like that.
But it's also what's in you.
But it's everywhere.
It's okay, but
it's not.
like,
It's not. Your key is not exclusive.
are
to
the
you,
Jedi
so-
wizards,
Yes.
and the Force is something that's in your blood, right? Like the midichlorians.
Or then they'd be sorcerers.
Yeah, the monks.
No, they're sorcerers.
The monks. Yeah,
The Jedi.
yeah. But they're also a monk.
How dare you?
So it's like the monk and sorcerer are the same, are counterparts. They're like the same thing.
Yeah, I think
One's
I guess
just
it's.
magic punches. The other one is magic brain.
I guess if you want to look at it that way,
I think that's what the book is telling us.
I guess the like where the flavor of a monk lives is kind of like in the house, in like mostly in its own house, but a little bit in everybody else's house too.
I mean, I guess in a way it kind of pulls, but I think we can pretty soundly say both mechanically and narratively, as written in 5th edition, it still feels strange and out of place because nothing else similar to. I mean, the sorcerer is definitely a counterpart. Just if you look at what they say about the source of the magic that they're manifesting, but the way that they play and the kind of like cultural tradition that they're trying to pull from and reference is very different.
So let me like take that concept and apply it to a different spot in the book. Why do you think D&D provides two separate options for sorcerer and wizard?
In what way? What do you mean?
Well, they both satisfy the magic user archetype, and sorcerer even like takes up in that same square-eyed concept. Sorcerer takes up the same spot in the square as a wizard would.
So why are you asking me? Why does the book make the distinction between a wizard and a sorcerer?
Yeah.
Well, I would say that the only unique thing between a wizard and a sorcerer in the book is the wizard has to study, the sorcerer is born with it.
But see, so you're right, and I think that's such an interesting reason, though, because this book's goal is to teach you how to play the game, but it's making a distinction on the basis of flavor. So I guess alternatively, it could just be uh, giving you an option for a different kind of caster, I guess.
Yeah, I think like so the way that I kind of see every single class that manifests magic, I think it's like this class manifests magic through the magic of this. So through a wizard manifesting through the magic of knowledge, a bard the magic of song, a cleric the magic of the gods, warlock magic of whatever. Pretty much the same thing as a paladin and a cleric, but monk manifesting the magic of mastering your body. WebDM put out a pretty interesting video talking at length about the monks, where they really did a deep dive into like the kinds of things that we're talking about. It's been years since I've seen them, but since I've seen that video, but they were kind of also talking about this notion of the monk being the manifestation of magic as mastering your body and like actually moving with intent. And they were talking about doing Tai Chi, and how Tai Chi isn't actually like a martial art meant for combat. It's like body meditation, just like the mastery of one's muscles, right? I think that is what the monk is trying to capture. And I think the sorcerer is like trying to capture the magic of innate power of somebody who is innately magic, somebody who's a catalyst for magic.
So for you, the purpose of classes is it seems like is to provide these flavor, these like archetypes of flavor.
I think classes I think classes provide archetypes of flavor and world building, by both mechanical. So it literally just comes down to mechanical and narrative. I think that like that's it, to educate you on the system and how your class influences how you interact with the system, and how your class interacts with the narrative of the world. I think that's the purpose of class.
Yeah, so like like flavor and function.
Yeah.
So if you were going to make a setting that's like your ideal level of fantasy, would there be any classes that you would exclude, and are there any that you would add to the pool
Well,
using D&D as a basis?
I would absolutely add.
Uh-oh.
Sorry about that.
He's going to Troika.
I'm going to Troika.
Somebody stop him. Nobody stop him.
You may not be able to see that. That right there.
Almost certainly can't. I can't.
That right there. That's the gremlin catcher. What do you think the gremlin catcher brings to the table?
A flat cap and a club.
That's true. You're right. A flat cap, a cloak, or a club. Some empty gremlin jars. A sack and a jar with one pissed off gremlin. That's what he brings.
So he's kind of a monster hunter in a kind of way.
Yeah.
So like, have you ever looked at Mercer's Blood Hunter?
No, never.
Is that the kind of, okay. That's kind of a it's kind of a glass cannon monster hunter, very heavily inspired by Witcher.
Wasn't his whole deal that he like hurts himself to deal damage or something?
Yeah, he activates a damage buff on a weapon by reducing his maximum hit points.
What a nerd. What an edgelord.
Yeah, I don't think. I think it's a little edgier than Witcher. I gotta say, but
That's
you know,
pretty edgy. I mean,
I
literally,
think
he's
we.
cutting himself.
Yeah, I think we found out that kind of archetype is especially dangerous in D&D for crit roll fans. But
Edgelords.
sacrificing your hit points for your class functions.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's cool. I think everybody should have that option, though. I think that option of like sacrificing hit points should be more for.
it depends on the game.
That's what I'm saying. It's like I think that's like a question that should be brought up in the game.
But what's Gremlin Hunter as a what kind of archetype does that add that no other class does?
Well, so the reason I like the Gremlin Hunter is kind of this is a very roundabout way to answer your question. What would I put in? What would I not? Right? I in Troika, I love the idea of a gremlin hunter because it kind of implies that you just have these like 3 inch tall, obnoxious little shits running around cities and all sorts of, places to the point where it's a profession to go out and just catch like tiny little creatures. And that says so much about the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
It gives you the items, what kind of stuff he carries. It tells you that this world is magical, that there are tiny creatures running around that just infest places. It shows like a nature into like the common people and how their lives are. And it shows all this stuff without demonstrating the character as innately heroic or innately evil.
Mm-hmm.
This is just a person that exists in this world, and they and this is how they contribute to that world. That's what that character does for me, right?
Mm-hmm. So if I'm the boss of this game we're making, your pitch has just sold me on Gremlin Catcher as a subclass because it is narratively pervasive enough to represent a significant portion of the adventurer's population. So to really drive home this pitch, I'm going to need you to pitch me on the function of the class to really make it stand out from the other ones functionally,
So
and require its own like foundational class.
so a lot of that really kind of comes down to the drawing the line between like a subclass and a full-on class. I feel really kind of comes down to the nature of what the game itself is trying to do, right? So if a game like D&D is designed to give you archetypes that then break down into deeper customization, right? The purpose of something like Morkborg is to basically give you a title and then allow you to go from there. With Troika, there are something like 50 classes in the beginning of the book. Here, I'll just like flip through so that they can see each one of these cards is a different one. There's something like 50 of them at the beginning of the book. And mechanically, the only thing that really differs is the skills that they start with, the items that they bring, and the flavor that they bring. So it has far less to do with how they function mechanically, because you could technically go through the world and the skills can imply one thing, but then you have a totally different freedom to go and figure out how to do different other sorts of stuff, whether it's acquiring magic items or just whatever have you, right? So I think that's hard. So to answer that question as to like why that's unique, that's hard because that's much more based on the thing. But if I was to say like, Dungeons and Dragons 6th edition we need to have a gremlin catcher in here, and he needs to be his own sort of archetype separate from the thing. I would say that it's not. I would probably go broader, and I would say like Monster Hunter is the is the class that he's going to be under. More
Gremlin
so,
Catcher is the sub.
Gremlin Catcher would be the subclass. That would be like your guy who's running around in a city trying to do stuff. There would be like your deep sea hunter who's like a your subclass related to like hunting sea monsters. Your Monster Hunter Tunnel Fighter who's out here like hunting bugbears and Umber Hulks in the Underdark. Your
I think you got to be careful with that kind of stuff though, because I think that's where Ranger fell off a lot, because they had, I'm a ranger who's a master of the mountains. Like, oh, this campaign's going in the Underdark. Time to be useless for like.
Yeah, and I think
Couple months.
I think so. I don't think it's a bad thing that those classes exist, but I do think I think it is cool that like the tunnel fighter archetype exists. I think that those kinds of they need to be made more generalized, and also there needs to be a lot more open communication with what kind of terrain to expect from the campaign, from the DM, right? So if you design your character to be this amazing tunnel fighter who's just here, and is just like an absolute delver, you should have that kind of translate to being able to navigate mountain passes and navigate through buildings in cities and stuff. You should allow for those things to be. And I think there's like pressure on the DM, like that's something that the DM has to do, to say like, yeah, these archetypes, these abilities that you have that are related to your class do in fact translate in this way, and so that's how we're going to like raise up your class and make it more relevant, right?
In my opinion, if I was going to be designing this game, first and foremost, I would get rid of all the classes, because I'm kind of in love with the idea of a like point buy system. But if I was going to make a game with classes, it would probably be very simple on that same concept, and I would probably, for the sake of flavor, I would probably do away with wizard, because the setting that would be developed in tandem with this system, I think would be kind of like magic phobic, and to the degree where you can't really study it. I do also believe that a player should be an exception, not the rule. So maybe it's that there aren't wizards intrinsically, but I think overall the idea I'm circling around and I'm debating myself in my brain right now is that it would be, using the terms of D&D, it would be sorcerer, not wizard. Wizards would be very rare.
Someone who teaches themselves magic is rare.
Yeah, and sorcerers being the easy road.
Being born with it is the easy road.
Is like the fast track. And I think when you're like considering like power within the narrative, I think that the fast track will always be the one chosen by these societies, and I think that's also goes into why like a D&D setting doesn't develop technology, because a technology I think represents the slow track.
I think getting back to it, right? Like, what is the purpose of class, right? I think we've kind of established that it's world building with narrative, setting player expectations, providing a blank slate for people to jump off of, and also presenting unique mechanical abilities that make them interesting and distinct from the others. Honestly, we could probably just wrap right there. I think like that actually summed it up.
Yeah, I think that the primary function of a class is to give the player the tools with which they will begin to interact with the world. And I throw begin in there because D&D is such a vast game, and there's so much more beyond your class that's gonna interact with the world and on that level. But and then how those functions take shape once the game starts tells you a lot about a setting. And I think I guess that you kind of have to work with your DM to really, to create a character that's like tuned into the setting right off the bat. But that is like the flavorful.
That's the point of
purpose
backstory.
of the thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally agree. A class's purpose is functional and then flavorful. Is that like kind of the concept that you were trying to formulate a question around?
I think so. I think I was interested to know like how so the way that each of these does this. We should probably turn on some lights. It's getting dark. But the philosophy that each of these takes is incredibly different. If I was to put these out, right? I think Pathfinder would be on the left as the most mechanically intense. And then I would probably put Wolves of God on the right as the most narratively flavorful. Because you're pretty much rules as written. You can play as other types of people, but you're playing a like what is it, like a 13th century Englishman who is like probably a woodsman who can't read.
Yeah, weren't the three classes like druid, monk, and fighter basically
In there,
in Wolves of God?
essentially, it was much more, the characters were much more defined by their professions and what they kind of grew up doing. And then there were a couple other things like it does talk about magic users, and it talks about like playing a character from Wales or something. I can't remember exactly.
Whelas.
Yeah, it was like kind of funny to like see that.
Those are my favorite things. Just to digress again, in the Netflix show Last Kingdom, they would tell you the name of the place in Old English, and then they would translate it into modern English. Yeah, I guess that those three kind of are all that you would kind of find in a you know, Viking Age plus magic setting.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all you really need for that one. I did once try a shorter campaign where we tried not applying subclasses. Like players took the base class and then that's it. Which, you know, like I said, my setting is a little bit magic phobic, so I think that was the counterbalance of the innate like power boost that magic users, or I guess it would be power drain that magic users don't experience by taking away their subclass.
Yeah.
But I think my players enjoyed it. We'd have to like have them on to really explain their experience. But I think the ultimate reason why I just had them make new characters with subclasses was because I wasn't taking the proper steps to make that that fruitful. Because my plan was to try to make it like older D&D where your and then maybe this would be an interesting concept to digress on, but I wanted it to be more like old D&D where your player character is much less defined by the class and the subclass that you've picked, and the more power you're going to find is through the items and that you accumulate in the adventure. And I don't think I was creating and rewarding the right kind of items to support that kind of play.
Yeah, because at that point, your items would almost have to become class features.
Mm-hmm.
I also cracked open Index Card RPG and Blades in the Dark just to look at their class options while we were talking here.
Mm-hmm.
So the class options in for the fantasy version of Index Card RPG, warrior, hunter, shadow, bard, mage, priest, and that's it. And I would say that that really kind of covers like everything that we were talking about. The only unique ones being bard and hunter, which are your ranger and bard equivalents. But something like Blades in the Dark, these are the classes: Cutter, Hound, Leech, Lurk, Slide, Spider, and Whisper. Right off the bat, like what do any of those tell you about their job?
Yeah,
right?
I think if I had to guess about this setting, I would say that this is probably a particularly flavorful one, because I think they're trying to, like I said with Morkborg, they're trying to get you to cast off the assumptions that you're already looking for. They don't like, if you want to play a fighter, they don't want you to be easily find the fighter section. They want you to read the classes to see if this is the function that you want, that you're most going to vibe with.
In the back, there's just an index of different factions that exist in a city.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, this just tells you about that. So let me run through these classes. Cutter. Cutters are good with are good at winning fights with violence and intimidation. The Hound. Hounds are good tracking things down and also long distance combat. Leech. Leeches are good at using alchemy and wrecking stuff with sabotage. Lurks are good at sneaking around and breaking into places. Slides are good at social situations and subterfuge. Spiders are good at masterminding maneuvers. Play a spider if you want to assist team members and deal with other factions. Whisperers are good at magical stuff and dealing with ghosts. Play a whisper if you want to meddle with the arcane powers.
I want to meddle with the arcane powers.
Bro, be a whisper. But yeah.
I did play Numenera once, and in that game, the classes are Glaive, Jax, and Nanos.
Glaive, Jax, and Nanos. What was it? Numenera?
Numenera, yeah.
I've never played Numenera.
It was pitched to me as a general system that you can really apply anything to. So I think that's the purpose, is that these classes are like the most potent and like rawly refined archetypes. No extra that you can get, and then from there you expound upon them to fit whatever kind of setting. We were playing kind of a Fallout style post-apocalyptic, not necessarily Fallout, but post-apocalyptic game. Glaive being the only obvious one, in my opinion, being the fighter. Jax, flexible characters, probably the thief archetype. Nanos being intelligence, and like the I don't know if they were necessarily spells. I think that might be another question, but being the intelligence archetype.
Yeah, the nerd.
Do you think that there could be such thing as like class bloat, where a class enables a player to bring too many assumptions to the table? Do you think it can hurt the flavor in a way?
I think it can only hurt if the stuff is contradictory. Like if you put so much garbage into the game that the entire experience and what certain things are trying to do and demonstrate becomes contradictory
Hmm.
and just obnoxious, I think that's when it becomes bad. But any other time, I don't really think so, right? Like, I don't think it's an issue if you have like 20 different cleric subclasses in D&D, right? And
Hmm.
honestly, they are approaching something near like 20, I think.
Oh yeah. I mean, base book. I think they have like 10.
Yeah, I think it's good because at the end of the day, all it is more content, right? I think it becomes bad when you're basically just like you throw together a subclass book just to make sales. Like I feel that's what the Swords Coast guide was, right? I really feel that in a lot of
I
ways.
I think the Sword Coast guide was like their they didn't realize how popular 5e was going to be in some levels.
You think they just wanted to like get a little bit of cash on the road to like publish other things?
I think yeah, I think they would have put more chutzpah into
I
that one.
think I think that they should re-release the Swords Coast guide to be like just incredible, like just massive, thick, and just go through like the flora, fauna, the different sorts of cities, their legal systems, and customs. Like no one talks about like the Halfling Hills. There's like apparently like a whole like thing that is essentially just the Shire in the Swords Coast. Um, like there's all this information that like you basically find out through Mr. Rex, right?
Hmm.
Um,
I think that Xanathar's guide kind of approaches that bloat. I think that one was more of
didn't Xanathar's guide have spells and stuff?
yeah, but I mean just the classes that it provides. I mean
Oh,
a lot of them. I think Xanathar's even had a few, and maybe it was a later book. Maybe that was Tasha's, but um, they did re-release a lot of the classes in from Sword Coast with a little bit more fine tuning to them
mm-hmm.
later on. But I think like Xanathar's brings something like brings the war wizard to the table,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's in my opinion where it starts to get bloaty because you have all of the wizard subclasses for each of the schools, um, and I think in each of those base subclasses, their big function is like to help you with your school. Like they're the first thing you get is that you can just copy spells of your school more easily. But the war wizard is like,
Boring.
a war wizard is like, oh, the shield spell gives you 10 AC bonus instead of 5, and you also have a secondary shield spell that you can cast for free, and you get all of these, and like it just shores up the all of the it shores up all of the shortcomings for a wizard without costing too much. And so I think in that way, like they're starting to get a little bloated on the.
I kind of think the inverse. I think that's kind of why that one's like the most interesting one.
In my opinion, I don't think you should ever shore up a a class's weaknesses without a cost to them. Like if you shored up a barbarian's weaknesses, which like what do you think of barbarian's weaknesses?
Mental,
Mental spells and like psychic damage, right?
yeah, like being charmed and turned, and
So if you had a barbarian subclass that gave you resistance to psychic damage and immunity to charm and stuff, let's say, you'd still be doing that at the cost of potentially the bear totem subclass, which gives you resistance to every other kind of magical damage, or the berserker subclass, which gives you a third attack, which is just nutty. Like there would be a cost to shoring up that weakness, but for a wizard to give up like casting enchantment spells quicker for a super shield, I think is not good design. I think like I personally I would never make a class that that shores up its weakness, much less, um, much less at no cost. Because I think, in my opinion, you have to maintain that idea that D&D is a team sport, and that these weaknesses are shored up by your squad, not by min maxing your character.
Yeah. I agree with that. I just think that with the Blade Singer or whatever it was, I think that that was just a super experimentative.
Which one is that?
The one that came released with the Swords Coast, the one that we're talking about.
The War Wizard?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They're called like Blade Singer or Blade something.
I think in Xanathar's that one's called War Wizard.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
So maybe there's another one.
Maybe. Oh, if that's the case, like, well, okay. So I think that bloat becomes bad when you
When you conflate two different
yeah, when you
subclasses.
think that you're having a conversation and you think you're talking about the same subclass.
Hey, you know what? If I don't think I've read the Sword Singer, but if a wizard wants to pick up a sword and charge in to melee with their D6 hit die,
But that's
you live your best life.
but
kid.
that's the thing. That's what they but that's like what they're do.
Yeah.
They get stuff that you're describing
Uh-huh.
that makes them more tanky. So basically what they get is they get a barbarian's rage type ability where they pop their sword singer ability like barbarian's rage and then they become like a melee powerhouse. But it's like
Can they cast while they're
I think so.
okay?
I-
That's bad.
I can't really remember exactly what it is, but it's like I'm
I
trying
don't
to
like
see
that.
if I'm trying to even see if the Swords Coast guide is on the shelf. I honestly don't think it is.
It should be somewhere. Oh, I see it. It's sideways in the middle shelf, above the.
Oh, there it is. Let me go
Yeah.
grab that real quick.
Grab Xanathar's while you're up, which should be to the right of it. Oh no, down a shelf. There you go. War Wizard also represents just another, I think the bottom line here is that I've just been hurt by players like trying to fortify themselves against me
Mm-hmm.
when I'm not even that aggressive of a DM.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but let me see. I think it's the only. Yeah, Arcane Tradition War Magic. Spellbook.
One-
Eccentricity. Arcane Tradition.
21.
Which is the following War Magic option. Oh, so it's called War Magic, the subclass. Yeah, so their second level ability for War Magic is a +2 bonus AC shield or a +4 bonus reaction saving throw. Which is just like a crazy versatility for a second level trait.
Yeah.
Where when you're comparing that to a wizard's like an enchantment wizard's second level trait of I copy spells quick.
Mm-hmm. I think what really kind of put me off about the Swords Coast was the fact that they talk about there's like a class section. They talk about all this stuff, and they talk about like let's say druids, for example. If I can get these pages apart, I just got them apart a second ago. They talk about the Circle of Swords, the Moonsheath circles, the Emerald Enclave. You know, they talk about those three different druid circles, and it's like, why are there not classes for those three? So I think that that's also kind of why the Swords Coast put a bitter taste in my mouth.
Their other second level trait, so they get these at the same time, is you can add your intelligence to initiative. And so I was playing 40k the other day, and the for all of you 40k fans out there, you know how busted the Leagues of Votann are. I got tabled first turn because they went first. Which is all to say, going sooner in initiative is one of the most potent and like classical like buffs you can get. And this like I said, instead of copying spells faster, this class gives it to a wizard at second level.
So in the wizard section, it talks about the red wizards and war wizards, and that's just like a lore dump. In the arcane traditions, there's the blade singing, um, restricted for elves only. Like, doesn't really make much sense. But anyway, Blade Song. Starting at level 2, you can invoke a secret elvish magic called the Blade Song to provided that you aren't wearing medium or heavy armor or using a shield. It grants you with supernatural speed, ability, and focus. You use a bonus action to start the Blade Song. Lasts for 1 minute. It ends early if you're incapacitated. If you don't medium or heavy armor or a shield, or if you use two hands to make an attack with your weapon. You can also dismiss the blade song at any time you choose. No action required.
If you use both hands to swing your weapon?
Yeah, if you make an attack with a two-handed weapon. Which is... Yeah, that's an interesting thing. So while you're blade singing, this is what happens. +1 AC. You gain a bonus to your AC equal to your intelligence modifier. That's not bad. That's cool. I like that.
Bonus to your AC equal to intelligence?
Yeah. Modifier.
That doesn't end. Oh, is that just while you're blade singing?
While you're blade singing.
So can you still cast?
It said that the only conditions that take it off is becoming incapacitated, putting on heavy, medium, or a shield, or making a strike with two hands.
Does it say that like you just can't cast spells?
Your walking speed increases by 10 feet. You have advantage on dexterity acrobatics checks. You gain a bonus to Constitution saving throw to maintain concentration on a spell. This bonus equals your intelligence modifier. You can use this feature twice. You regain all expended uses when you complete a short rest. So yeah, you can just keep casting spells.
So, mage armor, blade song bonus, shield on standby. That could potentially keep a wizard's AC up at 23.
Well,
pretty
also
consistently at like second level.
Well, also let's just say that we have like the best in slot dex armor, which I think is like 13 plus dex mod. So like if you have 13 plus 5, 20 dex, so you could have like 18 dex off the bat, plus your intelligence, which like let's say 5 gets you up to 23, plus shield on standby for another 5 to get you to 28. If you're taking double classing into this, you could get it up to 10, which would get you to 30.
You can't multi-class into the same class.
Oh, where does it say that?
Somewhere in the multi-classing rules.
Oh, that's garbage. I've never known that. That's too bad. But yeah, regardless.
That is ridiculously high armor class for a wizard.
That's awesome.
I don't think
that's
awesome.
Cool.
I think that creates the DM fortress, because like with the main thing to remember about a wizard is that all of their potency comes from just being able to cast spells. There has always been a balancing issue in Dungeons and Dragons between martial and casters, because like the ability and variety of spells is just always that much more potent than a fighter who is very reliant on finding a magic sword, magic weapon, or whatever. So like if that guy's in the party, the fighter is going to get that much sicker of a magic sword, or you would hope they would. But I think again it's more important to maintain a party's reliance on themselves than let a player create a monolith of function in themselves. Like I think that's how like main character syndrome festers.
I don't know. I get that. Like I understand what you're saying, and I definitely think that like there can be problems that arise because of that. I think that like this in and of itself isn't that bad. I just think it's the most interesting because it's the most different from all the other wizard subclasses.
Yeah, but in functional game design, that's not necessarily a virtue. And I think especially when you're considering the issues with balancing martial versus caster, it's important to let a martial class thrive in their field and not let the casters like in there. You know,
I
like
I can
where armor class tanking is like one of the things that fighters like to do.
I can agree, but one thing I will say is that I feel like if you were to take this class, like if you were to take this block that I just read of bullet points and just slap that onto a magic sword and then just gave it to a wizard, um I think you could basically take everything that this class is presenting as interesting
I'd be
and
fine with
just give
that
it to a wizard.
because one of the things I was kind of alluding to earlier is like, and one of the reasons why I tried a no subclass game, um, is because it gets the players to look into the setting for the power rather than their next
Mm-hmm.
level up. And I've never had a problem with players just grinding for their level up, but I have had players who were more excited about the next session because they thought they were going to level up
Mm-hmm.
for their build rather than like actually enjoying the game. Um, so I don't know. I think it is a kind of about how you apply it and like if that function can thrive in your because just because I say I don't like this concept doesn't mean it's not gonna go well at your table, right?
Yeah.
I'm not like a guru of game design. It all depends on your table, but I think it will always work better, as like you said, if you give it to them as a magic sword rather than the subclass feature they're grinding for.
I agree. I get that. It also makes it cool because then it brings into like the potential of like um certain like sentient magical items. And I do see what you're saying about how this subclass feature is so separate from the other thing, from the class. And really, if you just have like the fundamental like breakdown of what the class has, I think like a wizard, right? I think that they're pretty close to full power with the wizard subclass, right? That they take,
Mm-hmm.
or sorry, the base class, using just the base class without the addition of the subclass. I
Right.
think they're pretty much at full power, pretty much. I think they don't get like arcane. They don't they don't get like certain like weird things of like necromancer being able to control more undead, or like the evocation wizard being able to direct fireball around friends and stuff. um but yeah, they just aren't very interesting, and that's why I think this is interesting, because I think this, of most of the subclasses from the wizard, that's why, right? But I also understand that you're basically just adding another cake on top of a cake.
Yeah, so I think that's why that's dangerous is because you are releasing a class that is just definitively a subclass that is definitively stronger than the rest.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to gravitate those kinds of people to it.
Yeah. In a way, I guess that
Which hey,
kind
min
of makes.
maxers, you live your best life, but I'm talking about like,
Yeah.
overall game balancing.
Yeah. I would say in a way, like, the marshals are way more reliant on subclasses
Oh, absolutely.
than the magic users.
Yeah.
Trying to really think about like what, when I would play a sorcerer, a warlock, or a wizard, like what I would get. I think that the warlock is the magic user that's probably the most tied to their subclass. If you were just talking about
Hmm.
just the big three of,
They technically have two subclasses, right? They have their pact, chain, tome, or
oh,
blade,
the
and then they have
their evocations.
yeah.
Yeah, technically, yeah. But I definitely think that the notion of like point by class building is a good thing. Like they all of these things are individual features, right? And every single feature that's offered in the books, very few actually build upon the last one. It's really, most of the time, it's really something new that is being put into the kit. The only
Mm-hmm.
thing that I can immediately think of that requires a prerequisite is the Warlock evocations,
Right.
which, yeah, that's totally fine. Like, you could do that.
I think that you should still be in a point by be a little bit lax with prerequisites. There definitely should be, but there was like I love the idea of somebody who is adventuring just never spends their experience, and then like they're basically playing as a commoner for most of the campaign,
Yeah.
and then they buy power word kill as soon as they possibly can, but like they're considered relatively novice magic, so they can cast power word kill, but there's like magical drawbacks. I don't know. That'll depend on the system, but I think that's like those kinds of character concepts are funny. Um,
Hmm.
but I think we also kind of just touched on what we circled back to something we had touched on, which was like the functional difference between a wizard and a sorcerer, and you took that and described like that concept of like the difference between a warlock and a wizard. And I think that a sorcerer kind of sits in the middle there, um, because I think they get a little bit more out of their subclass than a wizard does, but not as much as a warlock. And that balance comes from their limited spell pool.
Hmm.
Like, first of all, they can't add spells to their spell book. But second of all, I remember when I first read the sorcerer, I was shocked that they only get like what is it, 2 spells at first level, and they get like 2 spells after that,
Mm-hmm.
and so on and so forth. Like they have a limited selection of their spell pool, and I think they designed the wizard was like we want to have more fun with subclasses, and so they designed the sorcerer maybe, and then that's where you get the like because one of the sorcerer subclasses just gives them access to the entire spell pool of cleric, which by itself is a very potent um, bonus because you're taking on another like you're giving yourself access to another role.
Yeah. What's also kind of funny to me, like with all these stuff, is like all that kind of stuff just goes out the door. Like as soon as you say, like, as soon as you pull back the restrictions, right? I think if you pulled back the restrictions on like every single class to access certain spells, right? Like if you just said like every single class, every single thing can pull from every single spell list, I don't think you'd have too much of a problem. I don't think of course the world wouldn't end. You wouldn't have sort of stuff. You would basically just have more freedom to craft the character that you want. Sure, min maxers and whatever would go through and do what, you basically just have a magic deck of like all sorts of unrelated meta type spells. But for somebody like me, right, there have been tons of times where I have wanted like a cantrip from one spell from another class because I feel that it's more flavorful for the character that I'm trying to create.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I don't know. I kind of look at classes and I really kind of think hard. It's like, is there an actual benefit to this class being um, separate or individual? Or is there a true purpose to all of these sorts of kind of like arbitrary rules that we're just thrusting on this game?
Mm-hmm.
Are like these arbitrary limitations. What, like, why is that, right?
So I think I've told you this one before, but I was on a bus ride with my extended family for a couple hours, and 2 of my cousins who are younger than me were getting kind of bored, and so I offered to like improv a D&D game for them,
Mm-hmm.
and the younger brother, I think he played a rogue, so there wasn't much explaining to do on that front. But the other one wanted to play a wizard, and I was like, oh man, I don't have a player's handbook. I don't have any of this stuff. So all I said was like, all right, this is how magic works. You have a certain number of magical points that that you expend, and that each spell has that costs magic points to cast. And as for spells, you just tell me what you want to do. I'll let you know if that's within your power, and I'll keep track of your magic points. Spoiler alert: the magic points didn't exist. I just kept hinting like, all right, but like, if you cast, this is a pretty big thing you're trying. So if you do this, you're probably gonna be at like half your magic points remaining. Just like very like overt like references to the existence of magic points, but like that was such a fun game. He really popped off as a wizard. He wasn't even like stronger than his brother, the rogue. I thought it was like very well balanced because we had a group of people who was just like, we were just genuinely having fun, right? So I think
Game balance doesn't matter when the narrative is fucking awesome.
yeah, and when the squad is on point.
Yeah. Look at Lord of the Rings, right? Magical power makes no sense in those movies. What they can and can't do makes no sense at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you don't question it because it's just fucking rad.
Well, in the beginning, there was the Iluvatar,
What do you mean?
the Silmarillion.
Oh,
They just don't explain it, but
Oh.
I know what you mean. I'm just being a nerd.
yeah. They just kind of say like this. They kind of just arbitrarily say this person is more powerful than this person, and that's just how it is.
Mm-hmm.
I never really liked that. I never really liked stagnant power and like power ceilings.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, what gamers like like a static ceiling?
So that's kind of an example of how I always prefer, and the kind of fantasy that I love is when magic and those things is nothing more than a tool of the narrative. And I think Lord of the Rings, like all that stuff, how magic works, that this person has power and this person doesn't, is not really relevant, and I don't really care so much about it because it's all just there to advance the plot and drive home the themes of the story.
You've talked a lot about magical settings with me, and in my mind, the biggest takeaway is that magic needs to, in your mind, magic should be mysterious, unexplained, and unpredictable. And I didn't really like until just now. I didn't really have a good like appreciation for like just how wishy-washy, ooh-woo, what's the
I don't know where you're going with this.
no, what I'm saying is your desire for like space that magic occupies is super flippant. You know what I mean? Like you like not flippant, but like super undefined, way more undefined than like I would want it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Like I think another example is Full Metal Alchemist,
Mm-hmm.
where the power of alchemy is entirely there to represent the major theme of the story, which is I think like I think the thesis. It's been a while since I watched it, but if I remember right, like the thesis statement of the show, they just outright say it in regards to alchemy, which is what's the term for it? But it's the true exchange. Like there's equal exchange. You can't. Nothing is gained without a cost, and alchemy just drives home that theme. And so, in response to what you just said, like that kind of magic is it's more pervasive, it's more in your face and exciting than Lord of the Rings, but it still obeys that rule of or my preference rule of magic and those things being a tool of the narrative. You know, when Superman in a comic book, he's like, oh, Superman can release all of his power in a supernova explosion bomb that's 3 times hotter than our sun. I'm like, cool. I can write down numbers on a piece of paper too.
I can barely comprehend something 3 times the size of a football field.
Yeah. Like, so just giving a character power just for the excitement of how powerful this character is just never
Any
registered
number,
on me.
any number beyond like 1,000 basically means nothing because it's so like incomprehensible.
I mean, just like take this digression a step further. This is why I've never really understood adversarial DMs. It's like, ha, I just killed my entire player's party. They totally lost this game. It's like, yeah, dude, I can like add a 0 on the end of this monster's hit points too. You know, I can add an extra die to this person's
I
thing,
am
like,
I am capable of exhaling through my mouth to form the sentence "You all die."
yeah, cool. Right.
Yeah.
I don't particularly understand that. That's a digression from player classes, right?
Well, I mean, it's about the principles that you use to inform the world, and the world informs classes. So that's why it's relevant. But it is a digression. Back on track. So cutting away from the D&D 5e kind of principles around game design, right? We have Troika and we got Morkborg on the table too. And we played Morkborg recently. I ran the game with you and 2 other players.
Right. I played Borscht.
Borscht. Oh man, what was
The feral
everyone's
deserter.
what was everyone's name? Borscht, Gottleg,
Gotleg, that was a good name.
and what was the last guy's name?
Let me see. They were all good. They were all so good.
What was the name of the
It was
horse?
start with a V, wasn't it?
Vort or something. I don't know, but Vort is a good name for Morkborg.
It was Vagel.
Vagel, Borscht, Vagel, and Gottleg. And what was the magical horse that could talk?
Oh, Barbarister.
Barbarister. Yeah.
And then me 2 dogs.
And like it's important, like viewers might be like, why do you care about like summarizing these people's names? Because their names were probably the most important thing as they related to their identities, because they had class, they each selected a class from Morkborg, but the only thing that the class really gave you was some items and the notion of your backstory, which is all invoked in your name by saying like, I am Borscht.
Yeah, when I was making my character, I was very inspired by all the tools that they provided you to get you into the setting.
Yeah.
I think I was also surprised that it kind of seemed like they were encouraging a little small degree of murder hobos, because like the table's very. I think 2 of us got natures or character traits that were like cruel or aggressive.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the kind of setting that Morkborg wants to play in. But like the result was that we all got to the table and we were already in the setting.
Yeah.
And we had these like I love all of our characters. They're so fun.
Yeah, I would say that the 3 characters that you guys all made have a lot more like immediate personality and like kind of grit to them that I rarely see in 5th edition in 5th edition characters. All of you were just these like gnarled senile old men who like for one reason or another didn't really want to be in this shit village.
Our group name, for full context, was the Dispensables.
Yeah. Yeah. dispensables or disposables? I think
Disposables. Yeah, you
disposables.
know what? It's probably both.
Yeah, I mean it's whatever.
We're not the brightest party,
Whatever is
especially not
for the
borscht.
context. Yeah, but so Morkborg is very interesting because while D&D will give you pages and pages of character options and define all the mechanics so and like really kind of tight, there is a a page that you roll for equipment, a page that you roll for personality traits, physical attributes like why you're fucked up, sort of idiosyncrasies and habits. Like one of our characters got a habit where he picks his nose until he it starts bleeding. And so like that just made him like he's like this super sophisticated noble, but he also just picks his nose. Like he has this hat and it's like that's such a weird like
He's a
distinction.
weird fucker.
Yeah, and it's like something that you wouldn't make, right? But it colors it demonstrates the color of the setting and how like gross and weird this setting is. Our Matt's character Gotleg was just an old man with like a top hat and a shovel that he would like bludgeon people to death with. And like these characters, like, you know, they're funny when you describe them. Like they're really just weird. And like I think like a few of you were also missing fingers or something. But it really,
I was missing
really,
a chunk of my lip.
yeah, it really paints the picture of just how like gritty and grizzled and raw this world is, that you have such like unheroic looking characters. And I feel like Troika, in a way, kind of does that by just giving you a ton of different archetypes, but it doesn't go in so much so into the personality, I would feel, as much as Morkborg does. Morkborg is all about personality, and I think that's where it kind of differs from Dungeons and Dragons, which really tries to just present a way to punch a monster
Yeah.
fundamentally.
I think the big thing is these tables that the book has to, like he was just talking about how we generated these injuries that we have. Like as you start to flip through the book, is this it right here?
That's the equipment.
So it should be a little after.
It's yeah, it's like further.
Further in, that's abilities.
Still further. It's past the spells sheets.
Oh, it's just farther in than I thought.
Yeah. Okay. So then there it is.
Here we go. But these tables like this, here I can't see details, but this is a table, and they present these tables in a way that like as you're flipping through the book, you want to stop and read these tables. They're like very eye catching. This one tells you to put the book down or hang it on a wall and throw a knife at it, and that's how you determine your feature for this table for troubling tales.
Which is
Roll
essentially a
d20
backstory.
or throw a knife at the page to the right.
Yeah.
And like it presents these tables so much in the forefront. I would, if I was making an RPG, I would put those tables much more front and center, like
Yeah.
like Morkborg does. Like put me in the player's handbook. I think they do have tables like these, but they're more general, and they're probably in the back of the book or buried in the middle.
This
if I'm remembering
also
right.
Morkborg also presents an experience that out the gate is much like I would say much closer to an R rating. That with everything that it demonstrates in D&D, I don't think that there's anything that's like rated above PG. I mean, maybe PG-13 in some instances, like when it's like kind of describing violence or whatever, but there's nothing in there that like really kind of like describes stuff. This in a lot, like on one of the pages there's just a dude, there's just like a heart, like a cow heart, you know. There's another page that there's like a dude getting a head cut off. That's demonstrated. The cow heart is a actual picture of a cow heart, and it describes how HP works. But like just out the gate, you know, looking at the cover of the book, you know, it's much just
Look at the
much more
back.
brutal.
I think
Oh
the
yeah,
the back is actively trying to start a new satanic panic.
yeah, with the goat man on the back, the goat man.
Oh shit.
But I would say that like I would say not to give like a review, but to give like a partial review of Morkborg. I would say that the combat system is not that interesting. The actual melee combat of it is not that interesting. It's kind of like a watered down
Yeah, we
fifth edition.
we haven't gotten there yet, but I did notice, unless I did this wrong, but there's no like movement characteristic on my sheet, so it's really just like
Yeah, they don't care about that.
it's just kind of like it's more like a Final Fantasy RPG where it's
Yeah,
you know,
just hit or be hit.
hit.
That is kind of like the like what this is describing, right? Where this excels, I would say that Morkborg is best for its tables, and if you buy Morkborg to just kind of have around, um, do it for the tables, because the tables on this, the tables on their DM screen, the table that they offer, one, it just looks good and it's art and it's like something that's just really awesome to have on the table. But like those tables are super useful, they're great. And then even like the other supplements and stuff have more tables and items that are just
And hey,
so good.
if your biggest downfall is that you don't have like movement baked in, that's probably one of the easiest features to bake in after the fact. So if
Yeah.
Morkborg is your cup of tea, but you just wish it had movement, just add the movement.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, you know, you can always like just slide in any sort of like combat system that you like. I think
Like
that
you did that.
yeah, I took the Troika system of initiative and I threw that into the thing, and then I kind of also dictated like
Well, I guess we did get in that one fight because we did the crowd,
yeah,
Wow.
technically,
but that was just me punching somebody over and over again.
yeah,
Or borscht was.
yeah,
But yeah, I think the big takeaway from Morkborg in terms of classes is how it subverts your expectation of what your class is going to give you,
yeah,
because you don't. I think it probably in development very deliberately said, oh, if we say fighter, they're going to want multi attack and they're going to want action surge and they're going to want this and that.
What
But
I think is also really interesting is that like the level up features in this are also separate from class. So there is no class progression, there's just character progression. Like let me see if I can find the level up um characteristics, because I'm pretty sure it's you just roll to see if you have a stat increase and then you roll to see if your health increases. And that's it. And they don't even give thresholds of experience to yeah, here it is, getting better. They don't even give thresholds of when you should level up. They just say you should level up. The DM should provide you a level when they feel that you've met sufficient challenge.
that's interesting. Roll 6d10 if the result is equal to or greater than your current hit point maximum. Increase it by d6. Oh, that's so interesting. Why?
So that you have potential to not increase it, and as you go up in level,
You become less likely to get
you're
a.
less likely to get the health.
That's interesting. It's an interesting, that's your interesting goal to have for that kind of function. Left in the debris, you find nothing. Silver, unclean scroll, or sacred scroll. Ability changes. Roll a d6 against every ability. Results equal to or greater than the ability, increase it by 1 to a maximum of +6. Result below. So that's for that one. You're going to be popping off for a while before you really.
Yeah, I think there's also one. I think you can also get worse. Like I think you can in if you try to increase your ability, I think you can also get worse.
Unless the d6 result is 1, the ability is then reduced by 1, but never below -3. Damn, this system is brutal.
Yeah. You could get punished for just leveling up. The audacity of it. The audacity of trying to
The
level.
Lion, the Witch, and the audacity of this bitch.
I've never heard that. That's awesome. But I think what do you think? You think you're satisfied with what we just went through, or do you think
Yeah, I think we covered it a while ago, and we've been having a fun conversation ever since.
Oh, that's
The
true.
flavor and function, the two core tenets of a class,
Right.
and you should compare the necessity of that class against the needs of your setting and your of the game and the players that you have. And at the end of the day, it's always going to have some degree of opinion to it. Like I think I've established, I'm pretty opinionated on these things, but I've also been hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're always going to have like class bloat. And I think in a lot of instances, it's going to be up to the DM to kind of like bake it and massage it into the world as to why certain stuff is different, why certain stuff exists, and how it informs the setting. I think that's why like session 0, like unless you know what you're doing, unless you have like experienced characters, you should always make your characters together.
Yeah,
I think
I 100% agree.
we didn't do that for Morkborg, but that was kind of more just like
I think in this case, like we just said, that the game gives us the tools to achieve all of that.
yeah, and well, it was also a one shot, so we weren't really feeling
true.
that we needed to like we were doing like the super just pick up drop in. But yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
I'm just throwing out word filler now cuz like I'm trying to figure out where to go with my sentences.
I think that means that we've concluded.
All right, let's get the fuck out of here. I want to have dinner. Dude, we've been talking.
Thanks for listening to our rambles for how long?
I don't know, but the sun was up when we started.
That's true.
So we'll see. Thank you. Have a good night.